So good morning and welcome to the Bernalillo County District Attorney's Office. We've asked you to join us here today because we have an important announcement regarding the conclusion, the successful conclusion of this office's lawsuit against the New Mexico Civil Guard, which, as you know, was filed in the summer of 2020. For those of you who aren't familiar with this particular case, in the aftermath of the George Floyd killing and the social unrest that occurred across this country 2 years ago, there were a number of protests that occurred throughout New Mexico, including right here in Albuquerque. And at those protests, the New Mexico Civil Guard, which is an armed right-wing extremist militia group, attended numerous public protests, ostensibly claiming the right to operate as a paramilitary group and as a police unit. In the course of preparing for that lawsuit, we partnered with the local law firm, represented today by Mark Baker, Piper, Hansen, Mullins, and Baker, and the Institute for Constitutional Advocacy and Protection at Georgetown Law Center. We concluded that it was necessary for this office to bring a civil lawsuit to prohibit groups like New Mexico Civil Guard from operating outside of our constitutional order and the laws of this state and of this country. We have successfully concluded this litigation with the entry of a default judgment by District Court Judge Elaine Lujan against the New Mexico Civil Guard for the conduct that they engaged in on that occasion. That default judgment will prohibit the New Mexico Civil Guard, its members, its successor organizations, its officers, or anyone affiliated with that organization from forming as a paramilitary group or as an unauthorized police unit to engage in organized responses to any social protest movement that may occur in this county or in this state. No one is above the law, and when we are in whether it's a criminal process or a civil process, they have to respect the authority of the court, and they have to resist the temptation to not participate in depositions, to destroy evidence. That was another key component of the deposition. That was the limited deposition that Mr. Baker was able to conduct with this primary defendant. He basically said that he had poured bleach on and destroyed intentionally all of the documents and all of the records about how this group was organized and how this group went about its business. And it was because of that the court was inclined to grant a default judgment in favor of the state. They cannot engage in any coordinated action that would give rise to the belief that they are as working in coordination as a paramilitary or police group. As individuals, they can be in public. As individuals, they can keep and bear arms. What they cannot do is engage in a coordinated effort to present a show of force in the public that would threaten and intimidate anyone else in the public. And I would also say, and I think this is very important, I said it at the outset of this case, that is a rule that can and will be applied to anyone in any group, regardless of your ideology. From my perspective, our Constitution and our statutory framework requires that we treat all groups equally. So whether you come from a perspective that is far to the left, far to the right, any sort of unique political perspective that you're trying to share with fellow citizens, you can do that. You can argue passionately. You can engage in public debate. You can organize for political campaigns. You can come outside of a public building and protest, as is your right. But regardless of your political ideology, you cannot engage in this kind of behavior. And I think one of the things that really motivated me to take on this case is looking at the history of democracies across the world. There are a number of instances and examples where countries start to devolve and their democratic institutions start to fall apart because political extremism and political violence begins to take over. Right? We no longer believe that the system will adapt and respect the views of every member of society. And so people go and organize themselves into private militias. And it's not very long before that devolves into open conflict. And so it's important for us to state unequivocally that there is no tolerance for that behavior regardless of your political ideology.